So my name is David Logan. I'm the CEO of Akupara Games. I've been in the industry for about 13 years now at this point. I started off developing games with a title called Whispering Willows, and then I got into publishing games when I had experiences with publishers that weren't quite up to the standards I was hoping for. And I started Akupara Games about 7 years ago, and our studio has continued to both develop and publish games.
So just for students basically to know what's important to bring to a pitch.
Yeah, so we receive a lot of pitches a month, and you almost need to think of it as a job application where there are many other applicants, and so if you're missing any key information, you're almost automatically thrown out. If you're it at least will take extra steps for the publisher to have to ask for that stuff from you, which means that they need to be interested in the game that you're pitching. And so I'd say kind of the core stuff that every prospective person who's pitching their game to a publisher should have would be, the first thing that we look for is just a video of what your game is about. And usually that doesn't need to be super well edited, doesn't need to be a trailer, but at least some gameplay footage that showcases what your game is about. Then if the game looks interesting, we typically will start looking through the details in a pitch deck. It's best when you've summarized these details in the intro email, and the intro email is kept short and succinct with links to each of these things. But we want to know stuff like, what's your development budget, which platforms are you developing the game for, which engine is your game in, what's your anticipated timeline. Those are all important information, to have both in your intro email and then expand on it a little bit more in your pitch deck. For instance, if you say your budget is $100,000 in your intro email, then in your pitch deck, have a slide that shows the breakdown of that budget. I also think the pitch deck's a great place where people can elaborate a bit on what you can't see in the current state of the game. So like, this is like what future levels can look like. This is what future content can look like. This is the roadmap that we have, for the title down the road. And then, of course, having a build is very important. But usually that's actually the final thing we look at if everything else is in alignment.
When in development, do people usually send you pitch decks or pitches?
It ranges everywhere from too early to too late, but I can tell you what the ideal timing is. For us, ideally it's around the vertical slice stage is where you would send the information to us. Between that point and, I would say, enough time to be able to market the game. Giving us at least a vertical slice will allow you to kind of compete with some of the other pitches that we see. That doesn't need to be, every single asset completed, but that should be some finalized art and animation and audio and game design, and we should be able to see your game loop. If your game has story, we should get a sense of the story and the writing. And it doesn't need to be perfectly polished, but it should give a good glimpse of, this is what you hope to achieve with the final vision.
when you're talking with the developer, whether it's through email or through conventions, like what's the best way to approach you? Or is there an ideal way?
I think my ideal way is just an email. It keeps everything, it allows me or our team to include the proper people on the email chain that need to be included. If it's a message on social media or LinkedIn, I'll typically just say, can you email me these materials, and here's the email to do it.
If I come to you with a pitch, what in your eyes would be a red flag?
I mean, I guess there'd be different kinds of red flags, and some of them would be the developer's fault, and some of them wouldn't be. So I think it's, if we're considering a red flag as something that it's automatically not going to get a pass from us, that it doesn't necessarily mean it's a red flag for another studio, right? It could just be a red flag for, it could be something that just makes it a deal breaker for us. Very quick ones are, is it within our budget range? Can we afford the game? Is it within our timeline range? Do we have space for this game? I guess maybe a universal one would be, if the game is, racist or, transphobic or something like that, that would obviously be one that would, eliminate the game no matter what. But a lot of the time it's more factors that, are kind of logistical. Is this the kind of genre we're looking for right now? Maybe they're just pitching a genre that we just signed a game for, and so it doesn't make sense for us to consider that game anymore. And I'd say most of the titles that we're rejecting, don't at a high level fit just the current criteria we're looking for. And then I'd say the other rejections that we have are typically just because of the quality of the game it's too low.
Do you think are there some games that would, if they'd come to you a bit later, there would be a higher chance that there'd be like a longer discussion at least?
I think so. I do believe that, assume you get one shot per publisher. And so at the point when you reach out, make sure that it's the point that you feel like it's best. A lot of the time that's, people are starting to run out of money, and so they have to pitch it at a certain point. But if you're able to continue for another couple of months with the current financing you have, usually it's better to take those extra couple months and spend a little bit more time on it. If we really like a game, but it's not quite there yet, then we'll give that feedback and we'll have them, circle back to us in 3 months, 6 months, and check it out again then. But usually for that kind of feedback, we've played through the build, we've gone through all their materials, we've taken it all the way through our evaluation process, and we go, this could be something, but it's missing X, Y, and Z. And if you address these things, come back to us in the future and show us a new build.
What, in your opinion, is the ideal publisher-developer relationship?
I think for me, it's a developer who has a strong vision, but needs support in other areas outside of the game's development. I think a developer, that doesn't mean that the developer needs to be able to fully handle the development themselves, but at least be able to be at a point where they could be, say you're building a house and you have the blueprints for the house already. You're starting to build the frame of the house, but you need extra people to help put up the walls and paint the house and to make it beautiful and to sell the house. All of that's totally fine, but you should know what your vision is, and you should know, you know, yeah, really what you want to create. And I think the ideal relationship is two teams that, really support and benefit each other over time. The publisher the publisher kind of fills in the gaps for the developer where the developer is missing, and the developer provides an excellent product that allows the publisher to better sell it. There's we've put in equal love and time and outreach into games that have ultimately not succeeded, as we have ones that have succeeded. And I think ultimately the ones that and sometimes that's no one's fault, but I think more often than not we see the ones that succeed are the ones with the developers who have just very clear visions of what they want to do, and that vision can stand out, that can give them their unique hook, and that vision is fun and just an overall quality product.
Do you ever back out, or what do you do when you see a team that has, let's call it a troublesome team dynamic? Either they fight a lot in a bad way, or they move pretty slow, they're inefficient.
We typically try to get a sense of the team and their dynamic and their personality through the calls we do with them, and through just looking at how their materials are presented. That can show a lot, but there's obviously things that we're not going to catch as part of the evaluation period. And there's been a few projects that after we've signed them, we've had to terminate the agreement because we've decided that and it's a bit messy, and it usually has to be a mutual termination, but we've decided that this isn't the right team for us, or we don't think that the team will succeed. But most of the time we'll if we make it all the way through signing, that means that we believe in the team to some extent, and they're at least worth working with. There are some devs who are very difficult to work with, and some that we, but maybe they're very good, but still have big personalities that are difficult to work with. And we'll typically still work with them through the project that they're on, but then maybe we won't sign with them for the next game. But I can definitely think of a handful of games where we've been able to tell that before we've signed, that, oh man, this dev is going to be a lot of work, and we have not signed games because of that. So for us, the team that we sign with is as important as the game that we're signing with. For us, we're looking for long-term partners. We're looking for developers that we can ideally do multiple game projects with. And so, and also we it's a long relationship. It's our contracts are minimum 8 years, and so
Really?
that's a long time to be working with someone else, and you want to make sure that you can get along.
How come 8 years? Like that? Do you sign for multiple projects?
No, that's usually just per project, but that's that's 8 years from the time of signing. So assume a little bit of time to release the game and get it out into the world, and then if we're making a big investment in the game, we need time to recoup that investment, and um, you just want to make sure that everyone's kind of giving it everything that you can for that game. If you cut it off to we used to have shorter contracts, and we found that um kind of by the end of the period there was still opportunities that we wanted to leverage. There were more platforms we wanted to bring the game to. There was more content we would have liked to release, and we've often just had to extend those contracts to allow us to do more stuff. But for us, we really believe in kind of the longevity of titles, and for us, it's not just about the launch; it's about what happens after. And so for us, it sort of ensures that we're being the long-term partners that we're striving to be.
You said you were a game dev earlier, and now you're publishing.
Yeah. Um, I started my journey, I'd say, similar to a lot of other game devs, which is I wanted to create my own game. I wanted to, be creative director and work on my own project and create my own world. And, at the time I had no idea what would be required to do that. I just knew that I wanted to create a game, coming out of college. And, as you're going through that process, that you realize there's a lot more. You need to create a company, you need to have contracts, you need to uh, there's so many pieces to actually developing and then releasing a game. And I love creating games. I created games for many years, and I think moving to publishing for myself, while our team still does development, I'm definitely more focused on the publishing side of the equation these days. For me personally, it was just it was just I knew I wanted to be in games, and it was just finding the right place for me in games. And I ultimately found that I was most useful. Um, there were other people who were more useful and better at being directors for games and leading the creative visions for games. And the place where I was most useful and best was, sort of more on the business side, was running things at a high level, was, um, and evaluating games for publishing, and I ultimately felt like I could do more as on the game publishing side than I could on the development side. So, we've continued to retain the development, and that's actually, probably still about half of our team is on the development side. Um, but interests change over time, and I've
Definitely.
I've done a bunch of different roles at the company, and currently this is where I'm happy. Will this be where I'm at in 3 years, 5 years? I don't know. Maybe I'll
Eight
be some.
years.
Yeah, could be on to doing something different in games, but probably still in games.
Why Akupura? What's Akupura? Akupara.
Aku-
My bad.
Akupara is the world turtle. For us, it's the world tortoise, and it carries the world on its back, and so we like to say that we help carry other developers and support them on our back. I also
You,
have I also have a 13-year-old tortoise.
that's awesome. actually had a I talked with the creative director of Trek to Yomi and the guy behind one of the leads behind Boomerang X, and they described very different experiences with the same publisher. They both described the experience as very hands off. So one of them wanted a very hands on experience, and the other one wanted a very hands off experience. Do you think people should consider uh, the size of a publisher when they're approaching them, or when they're ready to start approaching publishers?
Yeah, I definitely do think they should. Um, I would say typically, and this isn't always true, but typically the larger the publisher, the more hands off they become. When they become larger, they're typically signing more games. They're typically becoming more of a financier. And at that point, they're sort of just, and this isn't always the case, but placing a lot of bets on different titles. For a publisher our size, when we sign a game, the investment is big for us. It's it's a significant it's not where we can just make investments and not worry about how it goes. We want to make sure the investment is going well, and we want to make sure that the games that we sign do as well as they can do. And so because of that, I think that we're typically a bit more hands-on, because we provide a lot of feedback. We even assist sometimes with co-development. We're often doing the porting for the titles that we're working on. We're very heavily involved to try to help produce the best product possible. And I think one thing that people hear sometimes when they hear hands-on is they think micromanaging, or will take the creative vision. And I don't think that's maybe with some people, but that's not always the case. I think it also can just mean that the amount of time and focus and effort towards each project increases. And when we are even doing co-development, we still very much want the vision to sit with the developer and the creative people that created it, but we do want to help polish it, and we do want to help make it the best version of their vision that we can. And so our feedback typically is ways that that game can become the best version of itself.
Can I ask you to go step by step through the process of one of the pitches you received?
Average game that works out well follows sort of what I was saying earlier, where it's like they've presented video, a deck, and a build. And first we check out the video, and it just seems like something unique and fun. Maybe that's the art style, or maybe the mechanic looks really engaging, or it looks like something that we just haven't seen before. And from there, that's typically when we'll kind of, and we do this with every game, which is why I'm making it more general here. From there, that's when we go to the deck for really let's get more information about this game. Let's read every little detail. Let's see what their grand vision is for this game. And if that pumps us up even more, and we're like, okay, there's a lot of potential. What they have here is great. What they want to do in the future seems great. Then that's sort of the point where we'll then do an evaluation of the game itself. And does it feel good? Does it feel fresh? Does it feel fun? And I think those are kind of the three pieces with any. I guess then the fourth piece is, then do we like the developer, right? It's like, okay, we believe in the game, we believe in the vision of the game, we believe in where it is now and where it can go. we see potential with our studio, it fits our timeline, it fits our budget, and now does the developer align with us? Do they feel like they're a good fit? Do they feel like they'd be someone we'd want to work with for many years? And kind of from there, that's when we then make an offer to sign the game. So um, I could give a specific example, but I feel like it would be sort of the same story for the last 5 games we've signed have all sort of followed that pattern.
During my discussion with Ben from Boomerang X, he mentioned that he thinks there's a good budget for a game right now. Is there a good budget for a game right now?
I guess
it's a strange question. Yeah, it's a strange question. So,
I mean, if you're, I believe he's a solo developer.
No, he had a team of 5.
Okay. I think, let's see. Generally, money right now, I think, is tighter than it has been. A lot of that is because of, with during COVID, a lot of investments were being made that because there are more people at home, more people playing games, and it really surged the game industry a lot, and we saw really significant growth. And so because of that, a lot of investments came in during that time. But I think if you look at the trends right now, it's a lot of companies are letting people go. A lot of companies are cutting projects. A lot of companies are downsizing because they sort of took on more than they could bite off. And so, I guess my general thoughts are that's not the case, and that there's less money than usual. But I do think that there are still, comparatively to maybe 10 years ago, I think that there are more opportunities for financing. There are a lot more government opportunities in different countries now. There's a lot more grants. There's a lot more just dedicated, money and funds, groups like Kowloon Nights and, and I think that there are, probably about the same amount of publishers who were financing that they were before. So to me, it's maybe, and even partners, like, Sony and Microsoft, and, a lot of them are putting in financing towards games now too. So I think to me, it's maybe not bigger budgets, but it's just more opportunities that are financing games in general at this point.
If someone partners with someone already, does it affect, like, let's say someone partnered with Canada, the Canada financing system, does that affect if you'll consider taking them on? Not taking them on, but accepting their game as a project you'll be working on? Does it affect anything?
Yeah, so it really depends on how restrictive the terms are. Most of the government financing are pretty good for everyone. They usually, if as a publisher I'm having to take a smaller percentage of revenue than I normally would take, then that's obviously not good and needs to be considered. But if any kind of like recoupment is coming out of the developer side, or it feels like it's a worthwhile investment to give up some of our revenue, for another party because the financing required is too large, then it's worthwhile. And I'd say it's usually most of the time a good thing when we see games that have got outside financing, because it means that there's interest from that other group. They saw something quality in the game, so it's a little bit of a reassurance, but then it also, typically means a lower budget. And so for a publisher like ours, who typically funds, I'd say less compared to a Devolver, when someone has $100,000 already covered from a government group, or an outside funding source that doesn't affect our terms a lot, it's just 100,000 less that we need to budget for, and it makes it easier for us to say yes to the title. So I'd say 9 out of 10 times it's a good thing.
When is it a bad thing?
It's a bad thing when it like, let's say if we were going to take 30% for the game, and because of their other financier, it's going to mean that we get 0% until that financier recoups 2 times over, and then after that they would take another 10% of our 30%. That's when it's a bad thing. It's when the terms start really cutting into our ability to make our money and our investment back.
Do you think people are bad with contracts?
And developers, you mean?
Yeah, well, developers.
I would say typically yes, just because of a lack of experience doing it. It's like, as a game publisher, I've been through kind of the publishing contract phase, probably 30 or 40 times at this point. But as an average developer, maybe you only get exposed to that, once per game, if that. Not by anyone's fault. I think it's just lack of experience makes people typically bad at it. And so I do always recommend getting legal assistance with contracts, because to me that's the best. Signing with us, that's an 8-year commitment, and you want to make sure that you're protected. You want to make sure that if things, if the publisher stops paying you, if the publisher, you want to plan for the worst case scenario, and that's what a lawyer will help you with.
How important is it that the initial budget in the pitch deck is accurate?
I think it should be. Ballpark accurate, but I think just the tendency of games in general is that things end up costing more and things end up going on longer than they were anticipated. But I think it's both the responsibility of the developer, but then also the publisher to kind of sanity check the budget, and to try to flag any issues with the budget ahead of time. So I think if a publisher agrees to a budget, they're partially responsible for it. But generally, we do what's needed to get that game over the line. If they go, we're going to need double this budget, then we probably have to go back to the drawing board, or cut things off. But if it's, we need a few more months, we will finance those extra months, because we're invested in the game, we're invested in the team, and ultimately at that point it's more important to get a good game out than not at all.
If you see someone's a new dev, it's their first commercial game, big game, the fact that they're basically new to the industry change your approach to them? And does it matter if their game looks good?
Ultimately, the game being good is the most important factor. When a publisher or an investor is considering a game to sign, there are a number of factors that make us feel more confident. And being an established team who has released other successful games, that's one of the factors that a team could have to make us more confident. Is it necessary? No. Does it help? Yes. Other stuff could include, do they have a successful Kickstarter? Do they have good traction on social media? Do they have good wish lists? But have they got other financing? All of those things help make us feel more secure about our decision. But ultimately, how good is the game and how much do we like the team? Those are the two most important questions.
How do you determine a game's price?
I think it comes down to man, that's a hard question. It comes down to it is a lot of different factors. I think it's how good and quality the game is. The kind of art style it is, unfortunately. I think maybe games that are 3D can command overall slightly higher price. How much content is in the game? I'd say that's the big one. Is this a 2-hour game, or is this a 50-hour game that can be replayed many times over? I think probably the amount of content is what people ultimately will decide whether the game was worth the cost or not by how much content there was compared to the price. But I definitely think stuff like the art style and the overall just quality of the game will help. We have some very short, very good games that have found solid price points for the amount of content they offer, and people have felt like it's worth it because I think games where people can finish the game and walk away and still be thinking about it and still like have the story, like the story was still impactful to them, and a month later they're still thinking about it. I think those are the kinds of games that are really really worth their weight.
I'd love to ask you a bit about what you think the most overlooked aspect in a game's development is.
Probably the user experience.
Like
I
the game
think
design?
like the flow of how you can have a great game design, you can have a great game loop, but it could still feel disjointed by the way that the game is kind of presented to players. And I think many games don't take the time to make sure there's proper flow with tutorialization and creating their character and going through kind of those intro steps and it so to me that's the area that I often find could be improved.
Can you usually tell during a pitch if something already starts to feel like it's flowing, like in the vertical slice of the game?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. It's something that can be polished later on, but when you review as many games as we do and most publishers do, you can definitely tell when a game has kind of it just everything down from the game loop feels solid to the flow feels solid, and I think it really comes down to and this isn't the case for every game because not every game, would necessarily want to be classified as fun, but it really does come down to finding the fun, right? And there's there's games that can find the fun and also really just cut out that fluff and outside noise, and just like really like they've found the fun and it's just streamlined in to focus on that, right? And there's not a lot of other stuff on the sides. There's some games where you're like, okay, I really like this element of it, but this and this are just, they're not working for me, you know. But the people who can kind of just hit you with, boom, here's what my game is, it's this mechanic, it works really well, you can see how it can expand in the future and continue to be interesting. You know, those are typically the games that are most attractive to us, but I also think to a lot of consumers. Another thing I'd say that a lot of games are missing is a hook. You know, they're just like, we're making a Metroidvania in a sci-fi world, right? And that's not necessarily interesting, and it doesn't stand out. But the game ideas that really feel like, okay, here's something. It's when you get the sense of like, oh, I haven't seen this before. This, you know, and it doesn't need to be fully unique. Sometimes it can be blending a couple successful genres together, but
Action.
it feels fresh when you look at it and when you play it.
What can and should developers ask you as a publishing label for?
I think,
And is there something they shouldn't ask?
you know, I think it's worth asking for everything that you need, right? And if the publisher can't assist you with it, maybe they can find someone who can assist you with it. But to me, the developer should ask for everything that they need, right? What do you need to make this the most successful version of what you are envisioning right now, right? And then the publisher provides as much of that as possible, and the best publishers provide more than the worst publishers, right? And so that's, you know, that's everything from you know, every single project's needs are different, and some publishers may be better equipped to handle the needs of your project. You know, we talked earlier about, you know, two people that worked with Devolver, and one dev team that wanted them to be hands-on and one dev team that wanted them to be hands-off. Well, Devolver is going to do what Devolver does each time, and that's not going to change based on, I mean, maybe it'll change a little bit based on the developer's needs, but ultimately they're going to run as the company that they're you know, functioning as. And so I think, you know, finding a partner who's really aligned with your needs and who can really fill in the gaps for what your largest needs are. If your largest gap is you need a supporting team to co-develop with you, you know, then a publisher like Akupara is going to be, you know, a good fit. If your biggest need is that you need a $2 million budget, you know, Akupara Games is not going to be the best fit, and, you know, a Devolver may be a better fit, right? So I think it's really just, you know, finding a publisher that aligns with the needs that you have as a studio and trying to get that as close as possible. But I think in terms of asking, you know, ask for everything and then see where they can help. And if they can't help, you know, sometimes that's a deal breaker, and sometimes that's, they'll do their best. So I think it's important to know, like, what are, as a developer, what are the things that you absolutely need. You know, every publisher is going to do, you know, marketing to some extent, but how good is the marketing? Where do they target? You know, how much, you know, does your game really work well with content creators? Okay, well, if that's the case, does the publisher have a strong network of content creators? And do they, you know, back in the day when I was pitching Whispering Willows, you know, there was a lot of publishers that didn't even, you know, content creators wasn't even a thing yet, right? You know, YouTube was just getting started, And so publishers that like targeted YouTubers was very slim. And so if you're creating a game that really, works well with like replayable short form content, you probably seeking out a publisher that did something with YouTubers at that time, would have been really helpful. So I think it's really just understanding what the publisher can offer, and trying to choose one that fits you the best.
Do you have any tips for students heading into the industry, or students that want to build their own game studio?
I think the biggest tip I would have is, really building out your portfolio. Whether they're students or don't even go to school is less important compared to the drive that they have and the content that they create. Someone who's had 8 years of school, but their only projects are what they created in class, is much less appealing than the person who, since they were 13, has been making games in their free time, has now 10 games under their belt, and, learned by watching YouTube videos, right? So for me, it's I want to, as a person, I want to see their drive, I want to see their passion for what they bring. I want to see portfolio. I want to see that they've done a lot of game jams. I want to see that they've, I think team projects in school is great, but it can't be the only thing they've done. Maybe they've done a project on the side outside of school or starting one. I want to see that they're constantly creating, because I think the way to become best at art or audio or programming or being a producer and leading projects or writing or QA, it's by doing it, and it's by doing it multiple times. And you don't need to have professional experience to practice. You don't need to have professional art paying jobs to practice drawing art and to watch tutorials and to go to classes and improve your craft. So for me, it's just showing that drive to get those experiences.
I think we have to wrap up. Thank you so much. Which games should the students wish list?
For our upcoming games, if you like,
don't wish list them, just buy them.
There you go. Well, for our upcoming games, it would still be wish list at this point, but wish list and then buy later. Crit Master, Sorry We're Closed, Airframe Ultra, and Ever After Falls. Those are sort of our big titles coming up next year.